Hi, this is Nicole Eisenman, broadcasting not live from my apartment in Williamsburg, where I'm holed up for quar time with Sarah Nicole Prickett and our cat Edie. Sarah reads to me most nights, and tonight she's going to read to all of us. She's going to read my friend Laurie Weeks's short story called Debbie's Barium Swallow. So here she is.
Debbie's Barium Swallow by Laurie Weeks. Buildings or spinal columns shoot up from the pavement to sway clacking around a girl. Debbie, for this was her name, found herself one day walking like a friendly ghost through this forest of vertebrae. She's a disoriented T-cell obeying commands from a nervous system driven by a mean brain, and all of Debbie's instructions more or less consist of the same signal, which is, Debbie, get a job. What is happening to me, a girl thinks, walking to her job. No one touches her flesh, so her flesh is made of air. Though she's wearing an attractive dress patterned with duck hunters and fur earmuffs, Debbie feels like an exposed tooth nerve throbbing across the sidewalk. Oxygen in the city is composed of chemicals designed to make you feel kind of funny. You walk through the streets bathed and breathing in this corporate substance, and suddenly your body's awash in loss and grief. Only your job can numb this anguish. Thank you, Jesus, Debbie thinks, for giving me such fast typing skills. Internal sirens signal the uncoupling of her nervous system from her brain. Now your mind's an engine running on the abstract fuel of cash. Now your fingertips have fused to the keyboard and the distant mechanism of your body fishtails away into the vacuum between circuits. This girl, Debbie, stands sweating and smoking cigarettes in the urine fog of the subway. How would it be to have a girl like Debbie's arteries dilate around you in a slow, red rush of velvet drapes? How would it feel to tune Debbie's body into a swollen receptacle made of hot corpuscles, like a wet, fleshy bed where you could screamingly discharge your rage and fear and then relax? I'm a girl, but I pretend I'm a guy pushing in and out of you. I watched your body walking down the sidewalk. Guys knew who you were. I put my hands on your body. You were underneath my hands. Girls never end, and that's their beauty. Shoot one down, and one even younger pops up in her place. Flashback. Debbie wading through the frigid air on her way to Mrs. Seaman's first grade class. The vast gray sidewalk shooting out before her, a Russian beach. The small gray houses, concrete bunkers sheltering their misshapen inhabitants, electric water from the reservoirs nearby giving off a hum. The rancid smoke of bodies rises from the schoolhouse chimneys far away above the stunted trees. When she reaches the playground, a crossing guard, like an orderly, guides her through the crosswalk. Debbie joins the other small ghosts in a game of double dutch, but her bones and musculature swarm with lead and heavy water, and her bewildered frame can't possibly decipher the whispering equation of twin whips and cement. Disentangling herself, she carries herself across the schoolyard to a corner where J. Mark sits feverishly against a tree, his pointed face and hairless eyes swiveled toward a line of yellow dogs slathering outside the metal fence. "Do you love me, Jay?" Debbie whispers, and Jay rubs the pebbles with his feet, his knees and eyes closing in a shiver of assent, his tongue swelling out black from the cavern of his teeth, a gentle maggoty fluid pouring from his nose. A girl like Debbie doesn't walk out of nowhere to appear before you somnolent in a body she wears around herself like a brace, as mesmerizing as a sugar cube soaked in LSD. She comes at you from an angular black garden of instruments and appliances and mechanical shapes, a neighborhood awash in the radiation from TV. At any given moment, Debbie's tongue will swell into a gag because she finds it impossible to say what she means, as if she shelters in her mouth a deadly totem, a lump of evidence secreted by her cells, a byproduct of her saturation in those atmospheric chemicals and metals which crave her flesh as much as you or I. 5:45 a.m., smoking cigarettes and stoned in the park beneath a moist pink tissue of sky. A little bird is singing in the steamy morn, and Debbie, he wants to be her friend. Debbie hasn't slept for days, and she doesn't have any hunger, just some blood and its taste in her mouth. Her body holding the cigarette is invisible to her. She can sense its vast presence like a phantom limb, with its maddening, non-specific itches and low-grade clamor for attention. But when she tries to situate it in the park to calm it down, her body is absent and she can't make it move. Maybe if she picks up a novel, she'll find her own body somewhere deep inside. A slur of drool and cookie oozes from Debbie's mouth. I, Debbie, this faggot cunt crippled by my sawed-off dick, was once a baby who wanted nothing more than to recount humorous anecdotes to the little bees and dinosaurs inhabiting my crib, but I was transformed before the age of 1 even into a truncated dream girl projected onto the landscape by the powerful brain of a fitful male sleeper, a captain of industry and finance and medical research obsessed with carving order out of chaos. One morning I, Debbie, woke from my deep, lengthy sleep to find myself throwing up into a bowl of Captain Crunch. One morning I, that's me, Debbie Brown, woke up to find myself a bit of liquid data trickling down from the computer burns inside someone's thigh. Every day, walking to the bank or job or doctor, Debbie says just 1 foot before the other, then there you'll be. She tries to visualize her body as she walks, but it's a weak signal fading in and out. Something will happen today, Debbie thinks. This day is waiting just for me. Here's the fluorescent hallway and your life throbbing in your eyes. Here's the machine glittering with its jewels and light, mocking laughter squealing in from the circuits. And here is the park, a fluttery, unsurrounded place where a girl can take her lunch. As she dabbles her feet in the bubbles of a fountain, Debbie hums to herself the hit single, Me and You and a Dog Named Boo, Travelin' and a Livin' Off the Land. What is pain, she wonders, while her body chatters loosely in its dress or brace like a mouthful of ruined teeth. Wind chimes drift on the air like fillings from extracted molars, and language, a black food, fills up your mouth. Dear Debbie, says the inter-office memo, security reports that you seem to be making more trips to the lavatory than are absolutely necessary. As you know, federal law prohibits the installation of surveillance cameras in the actual lavatories themselves, so of course we can do nothing but speculate about your activities once you have disappeared from the visual field of the hall cameras into the ladies' room, which, as noted earlier, you seem to do with a peculiar frequency. Debbie, of course we realize you may have a medical problem, but we found no deviant symptomology of this nature in your current medical records. Dr. Joe Gannon, the company physician, informs us that the average or normal female employee will excrete 2 to 5 times between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. There are, of course, only spotty statistics on the frequency of excretion during the noon hour, as many female employees perform their eliminative functions elsewhere in venues such as a restaurant, department store, or, perhaps not unlike yourself, Debbie, a park. At any rate, Debbie, security reports that you make on the average between 16 to 24 visits per day to the lavatory, which is considerably higher than the maximum average, even if we allow for the excessive consumption of fluids which we've noted you seem prone to at your workstation. Therefore, Debbie, we're certain you'll understand our request that you visit Nurse Georgette Hawkins of Dr. Gannon's office on the 13th floor no later than 4 p.m. today for a urinalysis. On a happier note, Debbie, you're still in the running for Employee Lady of the Month, for which you could receive a solid oak plaque with a gold emblem of excellence affixed near your name. A little girl's pussy is so mild. When you're 6 years old, it's just a thing you have, a dolphin's friendly smile. There came a day for Debbie at the age of 7 when she lay with her book, Little Women, in a beam of sunlight on the carpet. Her disposition had the charm and color of a gummy bear. She was content as a little frog, burbling along through the book's merry stream, when she came up short against the sensual build-up of a young girl's lingering illness, and ultimately the sentence which contained the climax or death of the girl, a wavery, blurred stem of a girl, Beth, drowning in her sickbed beneath the milky light of dawn, and suddenly in Debbie's body a new gland activated to flood her limbs with a feverish fluid, and the place between her legs went liquid with heat and fear and pleasure as thick as the circulating streams of blood coiled inside her, looping their lazy way through her arms and legs, their red currents ferrying Debbie's body toward that final day in the future when her flesh will collapse inward to be extinguished in the gravitational crush of her own black hole. In young Debbie's cunt, and deadly new steam began to gather. Last night, Debbie snorted heroin, Special K, and cocaine, plus she was drunk. Her faggot friends dressed her up in a leisure suit and big red wig and took her to the disco. She stood grooving on the dance floor, loose, relaxed, slave to the rhythm, but for some reason completely paralyzed, and looked up at one point to observe her left eye dangling in a cloud of smoke over by the mirror ball. Whoa, Debbie thought. Tony poured her into a taxi, and in the deserted street before her apartment, projects across the road, satanic rat platoons lumbering in and out of the bombed-out building next door, a rogue car alarm piercing the windy dark. The cab driver leaned across the seat to give her her change and just kept coming. His body was 3/4 into the back seat, hand between her legs, before she managed to get the door open and pitch backwards onto the asphalt. Where were the crack dealers when you needed them? Where were their customers who usually swung all night, gibbering like monkeys from the cage over her doorway, trying to rip the gate open to get to the crack den inside on the second floor? Where were her keys? The cab sat dark and motionless behind her. Rats swarmed about her boots. She blacked out and came to her senses again around 5 a.m., slamming down a long corridor of utter emptiness to discover herself in mid-air, plummeting at 80 miles an hour from her loft bed to the floor, startling Mimi, the cat, awake from a nightmare of crafty rodents. That didn't hurt at all, Debbie thought, as she picked herself up and staggered to the bathroom. The car alarm was still going, cycling through the apartment. In the sick red light coming from the mirror, she saw her faggot pals had painted her lips in a heart shape and drawn red hearts on her cheeks. She looked like a blow-up doll for men. In the deserted street outside, a garbage truck rumbling by like a tank triggers for Debbie another neural shift. Remote vacuum of the sleeping neighborhood where young Debbie lay incubating in her girlish bedroom, sleepless at 3 a.m., a vulnerable time for adolescent insomniacs, and in the absence of other stimuli, the cold military harmonies of a semi-truck shifting gears fused itself to the erotic channels of her nervous system. Am I the only girl awake in this town? She would wonder on those cold western nights when she waited for the dad to walk into her room with a shotgun. The truck, with its secret cargo of chemicals designed to produce metastasis once the workers or sheep have outlived their usefulness, accelerated to vaporize beyond the city limits. Tossing on her white sheets, Debbie watched the radium stars swing by her suburban window night after night. From the stars' vantage point, Debbie, in her nightgown, appeared no doubt to be a small piece of pork sizzling behind an oven door. Dear Ann Landers, my 11-year-old daughter, I'll call her Tammy, recently confided in me that her best friend, Debbie, is having sexual intercourse with a boy, Steve, himself 11 years of age, and Tammy swore me to secrecy, and I don't want to destroy our close and loving relationship, but I am concerned for Debbie's well-being. Do you think it would be wise of me to make an anonymous phone call to Debbie's mother and school counselor, letting them know she's engaging in sexual intercourse? Or should I simply call the police? There's a guy named Benny Lymphoma tracking Debbie from his post with the IRS. Last night, Benny woke up like he does every night, soaking in a sweat produced by what he thinks of as his quote-unquote African dream. A dream where you have the steamy, swollen body of a girl, where you're floating in a state of arousal toward a hot, magnetic core. Everything around you is fertile, molten, black, and indistinct. Your body has erupted in a febrile slur of rash and slow-moving fluids. You're Benny Lymphoma, but you're a girl. Around you, the black planet steams, loses its definition, melts into uncontrollable hallucination, and permeates the moistened barrier of your skin. Your bloodstream slips its channel to flow into the air. When Benny Lymphoma puts his penis in a girl, Hot, convulsive horror shudders up his spine and emerges from his tongue in a gush of shame that tastes like blood. Lately, every time it occurs to Debbie to play with herself, her body inflates with despair so profound it annihilates her desire. The advancing sexual rush withdraws like film in reverse, so that the stem of Debbie's body seals itself off from her caresses. Debbie's own torso has snubbed her. When her eyes open every morning, she's cradled alone in a strange bed. She shudders in the milky light of dawn. Somewhere else, a palm runs across a young girl's nipple. You only have to think the phrase young girl to yourself and your body will react. The young girl's lips part her legs, part Debbie shuts her eyes against the glare. A wave of pain like electrocution surges through her muscles. Electrocution. Debbie is coughed from the subway's warm esophagus to find herself blinking beneath a freeway, concrete girders pushing up from the ground like tibias discharged from a grave. Debbie wades into traffic, the driver's hypnotized neurons pulsing in unison beneath the sun. Simply sonogram this way, says a sign with an arrow, 1 mile. Debbie needs a new medical test every day because A, she has a lot of diseases, and B, she doesn't trust her body, especially since she can barely find it, so she needs trained professionals to provide a steady stream of diagnoses, not to mention actual photos to monitor and document the cunning vicissitudes of her insides. Sometimes Debbie feels as if her body is a moist vat incubating a brood of young holographic Debbies, each one a nodule of fear, that her body cavities are host to a whirling circus of dismembered coltish legs, knees decomposed to jelly, that her skin is a sack filled with blood spilling from a little girl's disembodied, raging mouth, that the girl's scalp drifts through this red fluid, trailing long hair like a squid, that the floating body parts of this girl, who was Debbie, are walled in by adult Debbie's pulsing organs emitting the crimson world beat of sirens. On other days, days of cowardice and whimpers, Debbie feels she's a weak human being engaged in battle with God or Dad himself. Every time God lifts her skirt, which he does at the slightest whim, he drains off some of her fluids to replace them with injections of his own debilitating poison. What words can Debbie use for this condition? It is as if her strangled impulses to speak or scream circulate, mischievous protons, with increasing friction through her limbs, and, finding no outlet, soundlessly detonate, their seething, hot particulates searing new wounds, points of entry, receptors into the surface of her cells. Diseased souls dissolve in Debbie's hair like creme rinse and enter her body through her scalp. Diseased souls, which she reads about in U.S. News and World Report, People, and the New York Times, insinuate into her body their nerves and sensations, a serum of dread, so Debbie's own dread proliferates and leaks through her tissues, causing them to swell. Will she ever wake up, wonders Debbie, as she strolls beneath the freeway, from this long, dreamy state or zone of exile where she crawls and shakes with fever in the toxic dirt, crawling one knee before the other, and spindly vultures wheel in the bleached sky above your head. One knee before the other every day, inching from 34th Street to 35th, a node-shaped blip traveling from sector to sector on the grid, crawling back to your job in the distant skyline of white buildings dominated by a hospital's authoritative, soothing facade. When she was younger, Debbie liked an angular, harsh zone far from any town, because in the chill space there was room for her anguish as well as her desire. What had she been since birth if not a wet, receptive nerve bundle pulsing in rhythm to the vibration of magnetic rays and microwaves beaming at her from the TV and electrical transformers surrounding the house? Her nervous system was irradiated with the sexuality of radar and toxins, so she grew up to find herself responsive to vistas suggestive of exile, waste products and decay beneath a solar glare, and alien force fields of any type. Debbie would stand by herself, brooding in the desert or other desolate western landscape, adopting a sensual and moody pose in the presence of rusting machinery, abandoned factories, and power substations, feeling as if the emotional substance secreted by her glands was leaching into the atmosphere to recompose as a poetic iron carcass, oxidizing like Debbie beneath a frigid, corrosive tongue of wind. Standing outside a prison now in her new urban setting, Debbie thinks the mystery is gone, and a surge of excitement runs through her veins like a cold electrical current. A naked bulb hangs in her chest where her heart was. Steel bars compose her rib cage, and behind the prison fence, Debbie senses a throbbing, sullen populace that wants to be her friend. As she leans against the chain-link fence, an ambulance flashes past, a smear of red in the infected air. The white sky bulges like an eyeball swiveled back in someone's head. Bits of virus cultured by the prison medical staff for testing on the inmates are released periodically from smokestacks into the bruised tissues of the sky. The membranes lining Debbie's mouth and nose and throat are colonized instantly by spores, and Debbie knows the prison grows inside her, composed of the cells of her tissue. Okay, that's a little depressive.
Wow, that was really amazing. Thank you, Sarah. All right, everybody, have a happy and safe quar.